Commander Ryan Hale stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, watching the cold black void of space. The ship was silent, save for the occasional hum of the engines. His mind was on the mission ahead, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the strange creature in the holding cells below. A creature that had been the terror of humanity for years, one that had killed countless men and women in battle, one that had never been captured. Until now. The enemy's name was Atalfar, a member of the Eldrithian race, towering and insectoid, with dark, glistening armor-like skin. It was a nightmare made flesh. Its 6 legs were like sharp blades, and its glowing eyes seemed to pierce the very soul of anyone who dared to face it. For most of the crew, it was an enemy to be feared and hated. But for Ryan, it was something else. A puzzle. When the Resolute had intercepted the Xalfar warship in the far reaches of space, it had been a surprise. No one had expected the creature to be captured alive. But somehow, Ryan had managed to subdue it. Now, the war beast sat locked in a special containment cell, a transparent energy field keeping it from attacking. Despite the energy restraints, its presence filled the room with an eerie tension. Ryan's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden voice of his communications officer, Lieutenant Jensen. "Commander, the creature is awake," she said over the intercom. Ryan nodded and walked toward the nearest elevator. His boots echoed on the metal floor, the only sound in the otherwise empty corridor. He didn't feel the usual fear or nervousness others might have when dealing with an enemy like this. The Xalfar was a monster in the eyes of his crew, but Ryan saw it differently. He was curious. What made this creature tick? What drove it to kill? Was it simply following orders, or did it have its own reasons? The elevator doors slid open, and Ryan stepped into the holding area. The guards stood at attention as he entered, but their eyes were fixed on the creature beyond the energy field. Khazarath, the name the Xalfar had given itself when it was captured, sat in the center of the room. Its glowing eyes locked onto Ryan as he approached, and for a moment, the two of them simply stared at each other. The Xalfar spoke in a deep, guttural voice, like metal grinding against stone. "Why do you not fear me, human?" it asked. Its mandibles clicked together, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "I am a nightmare. I have killed your kind without mercy, yet you do not flinch in my presence." Ryan didn't move for a moment. He studied the creature carefully. There was no sign of the rage he had expected, no violent outbursts. Just a calm, calculating creature waiting for a response. "Fear doesn't serve me," Ryan said simply. His voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. "I've seen enough of it in the field to know it doesn't change anything. Fear only slows you down." The Xalfar's many eyes narrowed, as if it was trying to understand him. "You think me less than what I am. You think me beautiful." Its voice held a strange tone, almost like disbelief. "You should hate me. Your kind has every reason to." Ryan shook his head slowly. "No, I don't hate you." He paused, then added, "I don't understand you, but I don't hate you. You're not just a monster. You're something more than that. And maybe, just maybe, you're not as different as you think." The Xalfar hissed softly, the sound vibrating through the air. "You call me beautiful," it repeated, almost mocking. "Why, human? Why would you see beauty in a creature like me?" Ryan studied Khazarath for a long time. The creature's black exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lights, its sharp features both menacing and strangely graceful. In the flickering light, it wasn't as terrifying as it had first seemed. In a way, it was fascinating. "You are," Ryan said quietly. "Not in the way humans usually see beauty, but in your own way. Your strength, your form, even your mind. It's all impressive. You may not understand it, but there's something about you that stands out." For a moment, the Xalfar said nothing. It simply stared at Ryan, perhaps processing what he had said. Then finally, it spoke again, its voice softer now. "I am no poet, human, but I find myself intrigued by you. Ryan didn't reply. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the door, his mind racing. He had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time, he felt that perhaps there was more to the creature before him than just an enemy. As the door closed behind him, Ryan's thoughts lingered on Khazareth. Why had it spoken to him that way? And what had he meant when it said it was intrigued? The Resolute moved forward into the vastness of space. But for Ryan, the real journey had only just begun. Days passed aboard the Resolute, but Commander Ryan Hale's thoughts remained fixated on Khazareth, the Axalthar he had captured. The creature had remained silent after their first conversation, observing him with its many glowing eyes. There was no hostility now, just a quiet, almost reluctant acceptance. It was as if it was trying to understand Ryan, just as Ryan was trying to understand it. Ryan could feel the crew's unease. They had been trained to treat enemies with caution, to fear them, but none of them had ever seen a creature like Khazareth. The Axalthar's appearance alone was enough to send most of the crew running for cover. Its massive, insectoid form was as terrifying as it was strange. But Ryan was different. He was not afraid. He had spent enough time on battlefields to know what real fear felt like. And what he felt now was curiosity. Not fear, not hate. He wanted to know what made this creature tick, what had driven it to be so ruthless in battle. He had been raised to believe that there was no reasoning with enemies like this, but now, after their brief conversation, he was beginning to think that maybe there was more to Khazareth than met the eye. One evening, Ryan made his way to the holding area once again. This time, he was determined to learn more. He had decided that the standard methods of interrogation weren't going to work with this creature. Khazareth was not like any prisoner he had ever dealt with. It was a warrior, a being of pride and honor. If Ryan wanted to understand it, he would have to approach it differently. As he entered the room, he saw the creature sitting silently in the center of its cell. Its large eyes glinted in the dim light as it turned its head to face him. It did not speak right away, but the tension in the air was palpable. The energy field that separated them hummed softly, a constant reminder that Khazareth was still a threat. Yet, Ryan was undeterred. "Khazareth," Ryan said, his voice calm and steady. "I know you're not used to this, to being held captive, I mean." The Axalthar's eyes narrowed. Its voice, when it spoke, was filled with a low growl. "You know nothing of my people, human. Captivity is a disgrace. My kind dies with honor, in battle. We do not beg for mercy." Ryan's expression softened. He understood that Khazareth's pride was being challenged. To the Axalthar, being captured alive was worse than death. It was an insult. But Ryan wasn't here to taunt or mock it. He was here to talk. "I don't expect you to beg for mercy," Ryan said quietly. "But I don't think you're a beast, Khazareth. I think you're a warrior. And I think you're smarter than you let on." The creature's eyes flashed with something, perhaps surprise, or perhaps confusion. It tilted its head slightly, as if trying to process Ryan's words. "You are strange, human," Khazareth said after a pause. "You do not show fear. You do not." Ryan thought about it for a moment. "Because I've seen enough hate to last a lifetime," he said slowly. "It doesn't help anyone. It just makes things worse. I'm not saying we're friends, but I think there's more to you than just an enemy. You're not a monster. You're just a being with a different purpose, a different way of thinking. And I think that's what makes you interesting." Khazareth sat in silence for a long time after that. Ryan could see the conflict in its eyes. It was used to being feared, to being the one in control. But here, on this ship, it was powerless. It had no choice but to listen. "I've killed your kind," Khazareth muttered, its voice low. "I have crushed your cities, burned your worlds. I have spilled human blood without remorse. And yet you speak of me as if I am not the monster you should fear." Ryan shook his head. "I'm not saying you're innocent, but you're not the only one with blood on your hands. The war wasn't started by you alone. There are people on both sides who have done terrible things, but that doesn't mean it has to go on forever. The creature seemed to consider this, its many eyes flicking from side to side. You believe this war can end? It asked, almost in disbelief. If we're ever going to find peace, we have to start by understanding each other. Maybe we're more alike than you think. Kazurath fell silent again, the sound of its breathing the only noise in the room. Ryan could tell the creature was deep in thought, processing what had been said. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. As Ryan turned to leave, he glanced back at the creature. I'm not your enemy, Kazurath, he said quietly. I'm just a human trying to make a difference. Maybe, one day, you'll see that. The creature's glowing eyes followed him as he left the room. It didn't speak, but Ryan could feel the weight of its gaze on him. It was a strange feeling, knowing that for the first time, there might be hope for a being that was once considered nothing more than a monster. The days dragged on aboard the Resolute, but Commander Ryan Hale continued his quiet conversations with Kazurath. What had begun as simple questions from both sides had turned into something more, a bridge, however small, between two enemies. The Xalfar was still a threat, but there was a strange shift in the air. Ryan wasn't sure if it was the creature beginning to trust him, or if it was just the quiet understanding that had slowly been forming. Whatever it was, the ship's crew began to notice. Lieutenant Jensen was one of the first to mention it. "Commander, I've been watching the creature," she said one day, her voice tense. It's not reacting like I thought it would. It's quieter." Ryan didn't look up from his datapad. "It's not a machine, Jensen. It's a being, with thoughts and feelings, even if we don't fully understand them yet." She didn't respond immediately, but he could feel her skepticism. Most of the crew still saw Kazurath as nothing more than a beast. They didn't understand why Ryan seemed so intent on talking to it, trying to make some kind of connection. The creature had slaughtered many of their comrades, and for most of them, that was unforgivable. But Ryan knew better than to judge anyone, or anything, too quickly. Even the most terrifying enemies could have a different side, if one was willing to look for it. That afternoon, Ryan made his way to the holding area once again. He had noticed something different in Kazurath's behavior, something he couldn't quite put into words. The creature seemed distant, even more so than usual, as though something weighed heavily on its mind. When Ryan entered the room, he was surprised to see Kazurath sitting with its head lowered, its mandibles still, its eyes dark with something like sorrow. It didn't look at Ryan as he approached. It almost seemed ashamed. "You're different today," Ryan said, stepping closer. "What's going on, Kazurath?" The creature didn't answer immediately. It seemed lost in thought, its body tense. Finally, it spoke, its voice low, almost bitter. "I have failed," it said, the words heavy with regret. "I have brought shame upon myself, my people, my kind. We do not live to be captured. We die in battle, with honor. To be taken alive, to be held like this, it is worse than death." Ryan was taken aback. He had never heard Kazurath speak like this before. The creature's voice had always been sharp, commanding, full of pride. But now, there was nothing but pain in its words. "I never thought you'd care about honor," Ryan said cautiously. "You've killed so many of us without a second thought. You've destroyed entire cities. Honor didn't seem to matter to you then." The Xalfar's eyes flicked to him, but there was no anger in them, only a deep sadness. "You do not understand," it replied. "My kind are taught from birth that capture is the greatest dishonor. We are warriors, meant to fight and die on the battlefield. To survive as a prisoner is to live without purpose, to be taken. It is a stain on our souls. We are not meant for weakness." "Do you?" Ryan asked, his voice soft. "Do you the war?" For the first time, Kazurath hesitated. Its glowing eyes seemed to search Ryan's face, as if looking for something, maybe understanding, or maybe just a hint of sympathy. Finally, it spoke, its voice almost a whisper. "I regret nothing," it said. "But I wonder, if I had fought differently, would this have ended differently?" Ryan's heart skipped a beat. For the first time, Kazarath was questioning its own choices. For the first time, it wasn't just talking about victory. It was talking about the cost of that victory. It was talking about the pain of war. "You're not the only one who regrets things," Ryan said quietly. "Many of us do, but it's never too late to change. You don't have to die in battle to have honor. You can choose a different path." Kazarath remained silent, its mandibles twitching slightly as it processed Ryan's words. The air was thick with the weight of their conversation. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if time itself had stopped, holding its breath. Finally, Kazarath raised its head and looked directly at Ryan. There was no anger in its eyes, no hate, only a strange, almost reluctant respect. "You would have me live?" it asked, its voice almost confused. "After all I have done?" Ryan nodded slowly. "Yes. You're not just your past, Kazarath. You're more than that." The creature's gaze never left his face. For a moment, it seemed as if it were considering his words carefully. Then, with a low sigh, it spoke again, its voice quieter this time. "I do not know how to change, but I will try." Ryan smiled faintly, the faintest glimmer of hope in his heart. Maybe there was more to Kazarath than just the war it had fought. Maybe, just maybe, there was a future for this creature, if it was willing to walk away from the only life it had ever known. The days following Kazarath's confession were filled with a strange tension. The creature's behavior had changed, but it wasn't an instant transformation. It wasn't as though Kazarath had suddenly become a peaceful being, but there was a noticeable shift. The anger and pride that had once consumed it were now tempered with something more thoughtful, more controlled. It no longer regarded Ryan with the same cold indifference. Instead, there was a flicker of curiosity in its glowing eyes, a hint of hesitation. Ryan couldn't help but notice the change. He had seen enough in the creature to know that Kazarath was not entirely unlike the humans it had fought against. There was honor in its heart, a sense of duty that went beyond blind violence. But the war had clouded its judgment, twisted its sense of purpose. Now, as it sat in its cell, alone with its thoughts, Kazarath seemed to be questioning everything. Ryan knew that this was no small thing. In the universe they lived in, few had the courage to face the truth about themselves, especially after years of war. But Kazarath, for all its strength and might, was starting to do just that. One evening after dinner, Ryan found himself once again walking toward the holding area. His footsteps were quiet in the empty corridors, his mind filled with the same questions that had been troubling him for days. What did it mean for Kazarath to change? Could the creature truly walk away from the path it had been on for so long? And if it did, what would that mean for the future of humanity and the Talvar? As he entered the room, he was surprised to find the creature standing. Kazarath was no longer seated in the center of its cell, staring at the walls. Instead, it was pacing slowly, its many legs moving in a fluid, almost graceful motion. When it saw Ryan, it paused, its glowing eyes locking onto his. "Commander," Kazarath said, its voice deeper than usual, but still calm. "I have been thinking about your words." Ryan nodded, waiting for the creature to continue. He didn't rush it. He knew that when Kazarath spoke, it wasn't just talking. It was processing, understanding, even struggling with the weight of its past. "You say that I can change," Kazarath continued, "but I do not know where to begin. I was raised to fight, to destroy. It is all I have ever known." It stopped pacing, its head slightly lowered. "But now, I see that there is more than destruction. There is something beyond it, something I have never understood." Ryan stepped forward, his expression soft. "I can't tell you how to change, Kazarath. That's something only you can decide. But the fact that you're thinking about it, that's the first step. And that's more than most people ever do." The creature looked at him for a long moment, its eyes reflecting a complex mix of emotions. You speak as if you understand me, Kazareth said, almost incredulously. But how could you? How could a human understand what it is like to be me? Ryan thought about it for a moment, then answered, maybe I don't fully understand, but I do know what it feels like to be lost. To feel like you've done things that can never be undone. I know what it's like to feel like there's no way forward. Kazareth's many eyes studied him carefully. And how do you find a way forward? It asked, its voice low, almost hesitant. For a long time, Kazareth didn't respond. It was silent, staring at the ground, its sharp legs twitching slightly in thought. Then, finally, it spoke again, its voice quiet, almost uncertain. Perhaps I can choose a different path, it said slowly. But I do not know if my people will allow it. I have spent my entire life fighting. My kind does not understand surrender, nor does it understand peace. Ryan's face softened with empathy. You're right. Peace isn't easy. It never is. But if you want it, it's something you'll have to fight for. You'll have to show your people that there's more to life than war. It won't. Kazareth seemed to contemplate this. The creature's glowing eyes flickered as if deep in thought, and Ryan could see that the struggle within it was far from over. But for the first time, there was hope. I will try, Kazareth said at last, its voice steady. I will try to be more than what I have been. I will try to find a new purpose. Ryan nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. That's all anyone can ask for. And maybe, someday, your people will see that too. The creature's gaze shifted, its eyes no longer filled with anger or hate, but with something deeper, something that could only be called the beginning of change. As Ryan turned to leave, he couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. There was still a long road ahead for both him and Kazareth, but for the first time, Ryan felt that they were no longer enemies. They were two beings, uncertain, but willing to try. The days turned into weeks aboard the Resolute, and the crew began to notice something different. Kazareth's behavior had shifted significantly. While it was still kept in its holding cell, the creature no longer radiated the same hostility it once did. It wasn't exactly a friend to humanity, but it was no longer a mindless enemy either. Commander Ryan Hale had done what no one else thought possible. He had planted a seed of change in the heart of the Xalfar warrior. The transformation wasn't quick, nor was it easy. Kazareth still had moments of anger, still fought against its own instincts to fight and destroy. But there were other moments too. Moments when the creature seemed lost in thought, as though trying to come to terms with everything it had been taught, everything it had done. Ryan spent his days continuing to talk to Kazareth, asking questions, offering advice, and simply listening when the creature needed to speak. Sometimes they sat in silence, both trying to understand each other, unsure of what the future held. The bond between them wasn't one of friendship, but it was something stronger, a mutual respect that neither had expected. One day, Ryan received a message from Captain Westbrook. It was brief, but the words were enough to send a chill down his spine. Commander Hale, we've detected a fleet of Xalfar ships approaching. They're heading straight for us. Ryan's heart sank. He had hoped that their peace talks, however tentative, might slow the war, but it seemed that Kazareth's people hadn't shared his vision. The Xalfar had come to finish what they had started. The Resolute was no stranger to battle. But this was different. Ryan wasn't just fighting for his crew's survival. He was fighting for something bigger, something more important. He was fighting for the possibility of peace, for the possibility that Kazareth's change wasn't a lie. He couldn't let that hope die before it even had a chance to bloom. He hurried to the bridge, where Captain Westbrook and the rest of the senior officers were already preparing for battle. The crew had known about the war for years, but this was the first time they had ever fought an enemy with a face. Kazareth's face. Ryan had seen the creature's vulnerability, had witnessed its internal struggle. Now, as the Xalfar fleet drew closer, Ryan wondered how much of that vulnerability would remain in the face of war. "Commander," Westbrook said, her voice tense, as she looked at him. "We've got no choice. We need to defend ourselves." Ryan nodded, his jaw clenched. He knew what needed to be done, but his mind was already on Khazurath. The creature had said it would try to change, but what would it do now? Would it fight for its people, or would it stand with them, humanity and peace? Without waiting for a response, he turned and made his way to the holding area. As he entered, he saw Khazurath sitting in the center of the cell, its head lowered, its many eyes focused on the ground. "Khazurath," Ryan called out. The creature looked up, its eyes narrowing slightly in recognition. "I just received word," Ryan continued, "that HFY are coming. They'll be here in a matter of hours. I need to know where you stand." Khazurath stood up, its long legs moving with a quiet grace. It regarded Ryan silently for a moment before speaking. "I do not wish for war," Khazurath said, its voice steady but filled with a strange mix of regret and resolve. "But my people, they do not understand change. They will come, and they will not listen. They will see me as a traitor, as weak. They will not stop until you are all dead." Ryan felt a Khazurath in his chest. "But you don't have to fight, Khazurath. You don't have to be the same as them." His eyes flicked to the ground, as if considering his words. Then it spoke again, its voice softer now. "I cannot stop them. Not alone. But I can help you. I know how they think. I know their tactics. I can give you an advantage." Ryan hesitated. The idea of trusting Khazurath, of relying on the creature who had once been their enemy, seemed almost impossible. But he had seen this creature struggle with its past, seen it reach for something different. Maybe, just maybe, it was ready to take the next step. "All right," Ryan said, his voice firm. "We'll fight together. But remember, this isn't just about winning a battle. This is about showing them that there's a different way forward." Khazurath's eyes locked onto Ryan's. There was no anger, no pride, only determination. "I understand," it said quietly. "For the first time, I think I do." Ryan turned and walked toward the door. "Let's make sure they understand too." As he left the room, a heavy weight hung in the air. The Resolute was preparing for a battle, but it wasn't just any battle. This was a battle for the future, a battle to prove that even enemies could change, that even in the face of war, peace could still be possible. The hours passed quickly as the crew of the Resolute prepared for battle. The tension in the air was palpable, every officer and crew member working with precision as they readied the ship's defenses. Ryan stood on the bridge, his mind racing. He had hoped that Khazurath's plea for peace might have made a difference, but the harsh reality was that the HFY were on their way. And Khazurath, for all its internal struggle, had made it clear that their people would not listen. "You know what we have to do, Commander," Captain Westbrook said, her voice steady as she monitored the incoming fleet. "We need to protect the ship, and we need to do it now. No more waiting." Ryan didn't answer right away. His thoughts were still on Khazurath. The creature had told him it couldn't stop its people, but it had offered to help. Could they really fight alongside one another, after everything that had happened? Could Khazurath truly put its past behind it, or would it betray them in the heat of battle? He looked toward the holding area. "Keep the defenses strong." "I'll be right back," he said, his voice firm. He turned and made his way down the corridor, his footsteps echoing as he walked. He knew what needed to be done. He had to trust Khazurath, even if it was a risk. When Ryan reached the holding area, he found Khazurath already waiting. The creature's eyes were narrowed, its posture tense, as if it was preparing for something important. When it saw Ryan, it stood up, its many legs shifting beneath it. Ryan nodded, his gaze steady. "I understand. But this isn't just about you and your people anymore. This is about the future. If we don't stop the war, more lives will be lost. And I won't let that happen." Khazurath regarded him silently for a moment, its glowing eyes flicking toward the distant battle alarms. "You speak of peace, Commander. You want to stop the cycle of destruction. But sometimes peace requires a sacrifice. Are you prepared for that? Ryan's heart skipped a beat. Khazarath was right. Peace didn't come easily, and it didn't come without cost. He had already seen that in the way the crew had reacted to the idea of working with their enemy. There were risks, and he couldn't deny them. But there was something else too. Something more important. I am, Ryan said quietly. And if it means saving more lives, then it's worth whatever the cost. Khazarath nodded, and for the first time, Ryan saw a flicker of something he hadn't expected: understanding. It was as if the creature was seeing the weight of its own actions and the actions of its people, realizing that war was a path that would only lead to more loss, more regret. I will do what I can to help, Khazarath said, its voice quiet but resolute. But you must be prepared. The Exalfar do not give up easily. Ryan turned toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. We'll be ready. We're not backing down. Let's show them that there's another way. As they made their way to the bridge, Ryan felt the weight of his decision settle in. This was no longer just about a battle between two species. It was about something greater. It was about proving that even in the darkest of times, there was always the potential for change. When they reached the bridge, Captain Westbrook turned to him, her face tense but determined. Commander, we're ready. The Exalfar fleet is in range. We've got one shot at this. Ryan nodded, taking his place at the helm. Take us into position. Let's show them we're not afraid. The battle began almost immediately. The Resolute fired its weapons, striking the first wave of enemy ships with precision. The Exalfar ships retaliated quickly, their weapons lighting up the sky with fierce energy. Ryan could feel the tension in his chest as he watched the chaos unfold. His mind was racing, trying to find a way to win without destroying everything in their path. That's when he heard Khazarath's voice in his ear, its tone calm despite the chaos. Commander, it said, I have a suggestion. There is a weakness in their formation. If you focus your fire on their lead ship, the rest will hesitate. They will not expect you to go for the heart of their force. Ryan's eyes widened. He had never thought of that. Without hesitation, he gave the order. Fire everything we have at their flagship. Now. The crew worked quickly, following his command. The Resolute unleashed a volley of fire at the lead Exalfar ship. It took a few moments, but then the flagship began to falter. The rest of the fleet hesitated, just as Khazarath had predicted. Now's our chance, Ryan said, his voice steady despite the tension. Push forward. As the Resolute surged forward, Ryan realized something. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the chance at something more. They were fighting for a future where peace was possible. The battle raged on around them, the sounds of explosions and the crackle of energy weapons filling the air. The crew of the Resolute was working tirelessly, pushing forward with everything they had. Yet despite the chaos, Ryan could feel a growing sense of determination deep within him. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for something bigger, a fight for the future, for peace. The Exalfar fleet was starting to break apart. Their lead ship, struck by the Resolute's focused fire, had finally fallen, and the rest of the fleet was beginning to hesitate. It was a small victory, but it was enough. The hesitation was all they needed. Ryan stood at the bridge, his hand steady on the control panel as he watched the battle unfold. The enemy ships were retreating, but there was no sense of celebration among the crew. This wasn't over yet. They had done what they could, but there was still a chance that the Exalfar might regroup and come back even stronger. Commander, we're holding them off, but we can't let our guard down, Captain Westbrook said, her voice tense as she analyzed the enemy's movements. They're not done yet. We've only won the first round. Ryan nodded, his mind racing. How much longer do we have? We've got a few minutes before they reorganize and come at us again, she replied, her eyes never leaving the screens. But it's enough time to think about our next move. Ryan glanced toward the holding area. Kazarath's advice had been invaluable in the battle so far, but now, with the enemy retreating and regrouping, the creature's insight was more crucial than ever. He turned to Westbrook. "I'm going to speak with Kazarath. We need to know what they'll do next." Before she could respond, Ryan was already heading toward the door. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. It was one thing to fight against the HFY. It was another to fight for peace. And with Kazarath's help, there was still a chance to change the course of this war. As Ryan entered the holding area, Kazarath was waiting, standing tall, its many eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It was still the same imposing creature, but there was something different in its posture, something calmer, almost resigned. "I see that your plan worked, Commander," Kazarath said, its voice low but filled with a sense of respect. Ryan nodded, taking a deep breath. "For now, it's working. But we need to be ready. I'm not sure if they'll retreat entirely. They might come back with more force." Kazarath's many eyes flickered with a strange, unreadable emotion. The HFY do not back down easily. They will regroup, but they will not be the same. They will be angry, more dangerous. Ryan met the creature's gaze. "I know, but we can't let that stop us. If we show them that we're willing to fight for something more than war, maybe they'll listen." Kazarath seemed to ponder this for a moment, its eyes narrowing slightly. "You speak of hope, Commander. Hope is a fragile thing. And yet," it paused, then spoke again, its voice softer. "Maybe there is something to it." Ryan looked at Kazarath in surprise. The creature had never shown this kind of vulnerability before. It was as if something inside it was beginning to unravel, shedding the layers of anger and fear that had once defined it. He wasn't sure what had triggered the change, but he could see it now. Kazarath was beginning to question everything it had known. "There has to be a way forward," Ryan said, his voice firm. "We can't keep fighting forever. If we do, we'll destroy each other. We have to show the HFY that there's another way, a way that doesn't involve endless war." Kazarath's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, Ryan saw something that had never been there before. Doubt. Doubt about the path it had been following for so long. It was a small thing, but it was enough. "Perhaps," Kazarath said quietly. "But my people will not listen to me, Commander. They will see me as weak. They will see me as a traitor." Ryan's heart ached at the pain in the creature's voice. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that they couldn't stop now. "Then we'll show them. We'll show them that there's strength in peace." Kazarath was silent for a long time, its many eyes flickering as it seemed to contemplate his words. Finally, it spoke again, its voice steady, but filled with something that almost sounded like hope. "I will help you," Kazarath said, "not just in this battle, but in the battles to come. If there is a way forward, I will stand with you." Ryan felt a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the war was far from over, but with Kazarath by his side, there was hope. There was still a chance for peace. The tension on the bridge was thick, with the crew working in perfect synchrony as they prepared for the next wave of attacks. Ryan stood at the helm, his hand steady, but his mind was far from calm. The HFY fleet had retreated, but it was only temporary. They were regrouping, preparing to strike again. Ryan had spoken with Kazarath. He had seen the flicker of doubt in the creature's eyes, a rare and precious thing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give him hope. There was still a chance that peace could be achieved, but it wasn't going to be easy. Captain Westbrook's voice broke his thoughts. "Commander, we're receiving another signal from the HFY fleet. They're readying for another assault. This time, they're coming in full force." Ryan took a deep breath. He knew this was it. They had one final opportunity to either end the war or plunge both sides into total destruction. The HFY weren't just fighting for territory or power. They were fighting for survival, for their way of life. And if they didn't stop the cycle of violence, it would continue to tear the galaxy apart. "We're ready, Captain," Ryan said, his voice steady. "But we need a plan. We can't just keep fighting them like this." Westbrook nodded. "Agreed. We've been holding our ground, but we need something more. Something that will make them hesitate. Something that will show them we're not just a target. We're willing to fight for something bigger." Ryan's mind raced. What would it take to make the Xalfar pause? To make them think about peace, even for just a moment? He glanced toward the holding area. Khazarath had proven invaluable in the past. Perhaps it was time to reach out again. "I'm going to speak to Khazarath," Ryan said. "We need more than just firepower this time. We need to show them that there's another way." Westbrook didn't argue. She knew the importance of Khazarath's role in this. The creature's insight into the Xalfar's tactics and mindset had already made a difference. If there was any chance of stopping the war, it lay with the creature's knowledge. As Ryan made his way to the holding area, he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The Xalfar were coming, and this time it felt different. The battle wasn't just about military tactics. It was about something deeper. It was about proving that humanity and the Xalfar could coexist, that there was more to them than just their differences. When he entered the holding area, Khazarath was waiting. The creature's posture was no longer rigid with anger or defiance. Instead, it stood still, its eyes thoughtful. There was something almost human about it now. The transformation had been slow, but Ryan could see it. Khazarath was changing. "We don't have much time," Ryan said. "The Xalfar fleet is preparing to attack again. This time, they won't hesitate." Khazarath's many eyes narrowed. "They are angry. They will not listen to reason. They believe in strength, not words." "I know," Ryan said, "but that's why we need to do something different. We need to show them that there's more strength in peace than in violence. We can't keep fighting forever." Khazarath was silent for a long moment, its eyes flickering with something Ryan couldn't quite place. Finally, the creature spoke, its voice softer than before. "Your people are different, Commander. I have seen this. You believe in something beyond power. You believe in something better." Ryan felt a small spark of hope. "That's what I'm trying to show them. We don't need to destroy each other. We can find another way." Khazarath seemed to consider this, its many eyes focused on Ryan. Then it spoke again. "I will help you. I will offer what knowledge I can, but I cannot promise that it will be enough. My people are not easily swayed." Ryan nodded. "It's not about promises. It's about showing them that we're willing to fight for something that matters, something worth protecting." The creature's eyes flickered again, and for a moment, Ryan could have sworn he saw a flicker of emotion, a realization. Khazarath was beginning to understand. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was a way to end this war after all. With renewed determination, Ryan turned toward the door. "We have to be ready. The Xalfar won't give up easily, but we have one shot at this. Let's make it count." As Ryan returned to the bridge, he felt a strange sense of unity between himself and Khazarath. It wasn't a friendship, not yet, but it was something more. It was an alliance, and in this moment, that was enough. They had to make the Xalfar see that there was another way, that peace was not just possible, but necessary. The crew of the Resolute was ready, and with Khazarath's help, they would face the Xalfar one final time. This battle, however, wouldn't just be fought with weapons. It would be fought with conviction, with the hope that even in the face of war, change was possible. The atmosphere on the bridge was heavy with anticipation. The crew of the Resolute was ready for the final confrontation. The Xalfar fleet was approaching fast. But this time, the crew wasn't just preparing for battle. They were preparing for something bigger, a chance for peace, something no one had thought possible. Ryan stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the vast space ahead. He could feel the tension building in the pit of his stomach. The Xalfar weren't going to be easy to defeat, but this time, it wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about showing them there was a better way. "We've been through a lot," Captain Westbrook said, her voice steady but filled with an unspoken weight. "This is it, Commander. They're not just coming for us. They're coming to destroy everything. But we're not backing down. We've got one shot at this." Ryan turned to face her, his expression serious. "We've prepared for this, but we need to remember, this isn't just a battle. It's a chance to show them that war doesn't have to be the answer." Westbrook nodded, her eyes narrowing as she watched the Sci-Fi ships growing closer. "I know, Commander, but we need something more. They're not just going to listen to us. We have to make them see it." Ryan's mind raced. He had seen the hesitation in Kazarath's eyes, the uncertainty. The creature had been willing to help, but could it really change the minds of its people? Could they truly find a way to stop the endless cycle of war? "We have Kazarath," Ryan said, his voice steady. "We can do this. We just need to show them that we're willing to fight for more than just survival. We're fighting for a future." With a deep breath, he turned back to the front, his eyes meeting the glowing red lights of the enemy fleet. It was now or never. The Xalfar would not hesitate. They would attack with everything they had, and the Resolute would need to be ready. The first wave of enemy ships came into range, their weapons primed and ready. The crew worked swiftly, positioning the ship and locking onto their targets. The tension was unbearable, but Ryan remained focused. He wasn't just a commander. He was a symbol of hope. If they failed now, it would mean the end for both sides. "Ready," Westbrook called out, her voice calm despite the storm raging outside. "Firing in 3, 2. Ryan nodded. "Fire." The Resolute unleashed its firepower, launching a barrage of energy blasts at the incoming ships. The enemy retaliated with equal force, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The battle raged in a flurry of light and explosions. But in the midst of the chaos, Ryan's mind remained calm. He knew they couldn't win this by force alone. They had to show the Xalfar something more. They had to prove that peace was possible. Kazarath's voice echoed in Ryan's ear. "Commander, now is the time. Focus your fire on their command ship. We have to make them understand that we are not the enemy. We are fighting for something bigger." Ryan's heart raced, but he knew Kazarath was right. This was their chance. He gave the order, and the Resolute locked onto the Xalfar flagship. Firing at their command ship, Ryan called out, his voice steady. The Resolute's weapons charged again, sending a concentrated blast toward the enemy flagship. The Xalfar ship took the hit, but it didn't explode as Ryan had hoped. Instead, it faltered, then stabilized, as if the crew aboard was unsure of what to do next. The rest of the fleet hesitated, a strange silence settling over the battlefield. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. This was it. "We have them," Ryan whispered, but it wasn't a victory. It was a moment of possibility. "Now," Kazarath's voice spoke, "we reach out. Show them who you are." Ryan nodded, his fingers trembling slightly as he pressed a few buttons. A message was sent, broadcasted across the entire Xalfar fleet. It wasn't a command or a demand. It was a plea for peace. The message was simple. "We do not wish to fight. We wish to live. There is another way." The silence that followed was deafening. For a long moment, no one moved. The Xalfar ships hovered in space, their weapons lowered. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the message was answered, not with fire or violence, but with a soft, steady signal. The Xalfar were listening. For the first time, Ryan allowed himself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had done it. They had shown the Xalfar a different path, one that didn't involve destruction. And in that moment, with the two fleets floating side by side, there was a chance for a new beginning. The battle was over. The war was over. But the real work was just beginning.